This is a war we should never have gotten into. This is a war right now which has already resulted in thousands of people being killed. In Lebanon, you had 1 million people who are displaced. I hope it ends as soon as possible.
Bernie Sanders went on The Source with Caitlin Collins to share his views on Donald Trump's immoral and illegal war in Iran. And in this segment, we're going to look at clips from that interview between Caitlin Collins and Senator Bernie Sanders, while also sharing some thoughts along the way so we can understand everything together.
We have some of our top sources here tonight on the show to try to make sense of everything that we're learning in just the last 24 hours alone. And Senator Bernie Sanders will join me here on set in just a moment. But first, tonight, CNN has learned that the administration is preparing to deploy 1,000 soldiers with the Army's elite 82nd Airborne Division to the Middle East. That's in addition to the thousands of Marines and sailors who are already on the way, even as we're hearing from President Trump sending messages like this one from the Oval Office today.
Well, I think we're going to end it. I can't tell you for sure. I don't like to say this. We've won this. This war has been won.
Of course, one might ask, if the president does believe this war has been won, why thousands more U.S. service members are being sent to the region tonight? That question for the president comes as he also says that the United States and Iran are discussing potential peace talks.
We're in negotiations right now. They're doing it along with Marco, JD. We have a number of people doing it. And the other side, I can tell you, they'd like to make a deal.
There's been reports that the vice president is leading those negotiations. Is that true?
Well, he's involved in them. JD is involved, and Marco's involved, and Jared Kushner's involved, very smart guy, and Steve Witkoff, smart guy, is involved, and I'm involved.
As the president cites everyone who is helping with these talks, we do know tonight that there have been communications between the United States and Iran through intermediaries about sitting down and talking. And that news came as in President Trump's telling today, he said it may not have been exactly well received by his Pentagon chief who was in the room.
I said, Pete and General Raisin Kane, I think this thing's going to be settled very soon. Here they go. Oh, that's too bad. Pete didn't want it to be settled.
And when Secretary Pete Hegseth, whom the president was referring to there, was asked to give his update on the war from the Oval Office today, this statement from Secretary Hegseth stood out.
And that's why we see ourselves as part of this negotiation as well. We negotiate with bombs.
Apparently, those bombs, which are still dropping tonight, have not stopped the Iranians yet, according to President Trump, from sending him what he has described, mysteriously so, and White House officials have declined to elaborate in the hours since this comment, after he said the Iranians sent him a very big present.
They did something yesterday that was amazing, actually. They gave us a present, and the present arrived today. It was a very big present worth a tremendous amount of money. And I'm not going to tell you what that present is, but it was a very significant prize. And they gave it to us, and they said they were going to give it. So that meant one thing to me, we're dealing with the right people.
Is that nuclear related?
No, it wasn't nuclear related. It was oil and gas related.
And joining me tonight is the independent senator of Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders. And thank you, sir, for being here. On the war with Iran, President is talking today about these ongoing talks with Iran. That comes after he was threatening to bomb their power plants and putting deadlines on that. He's now extended it to Friday. When you hear what the White House is saying, do you believe that he's looking for an off-ramp in this war?
There is evidence that, in fact, he is not talking to Iran, that's a lie, stated in order to calm the stock market and to lower oil prices. So I have not a lot of confidence in anything the president says regarding the war. This is a war we should never have gotten into. This is a war right now which has already resulted in thousands of people being killed. In Lebanon, you had 1 million people who are displaced. I hope it ends as soon as possible.
I mean, I think that's the real question. But I mean, the president said today that when he told Secretary Pete Hegseth the war might be winding down, the president said he was disappointed in that. What do you make of that?
He was disappointed in what?
He said that Hegseth was disappointed when the president told him the war may be winding down soon.
I frankly don't believe much of what the president says, so no comment on that.
If they come to Congress and ask for $200 billion, what's your response to that?
Absolutely not. In fact, we're going to bring forth a joint resolution of disapproval in a couple of weeks, which will stop the 20,000 bombs that are going to Israel and the bulldozers that are going to Israel to knock down homes and buildings on the West Bank. So no, I will not support funding for that war.
The president has heavily praised Israel and talked about what an ally they've been in this. Obviously, one thing that's really affected Americans, and I'm sure you've heard this from your constituents, is gas prices here at home, energy prices, what we've been seeing with this global energy crisis that's playing
and the
out.
answer is yes, of course. Gas prices are rising. People are deeply concerned. This is a president who's supposed to be worrying about affordability. But let's put it into a broader context. The United States of America started this war. It launched an initiative, a unilateral attack along with Israel, which assassinated the leaders of those countries, and starting a situation now which is causing massive suffering in the Middle East. And whether we want to be working with Israel, which has devastated the people of Gaza, 10% of the people of Gaza are dead or wounded, I'm not quite sure those are the alliances, those are the allies we need to be working with.
All Democrats should be using the same kind of messaging that independent Senator Bernie Sanders is using here, and they should be clearly saying that we never should have gotten into this war, we will not fund this war, and we should no longer be working with Israel. And while that may not be the exact wording that Bernie Sanders used, he is still making the point that maybe the United States should not be so involved with this particular ally, and that should be the focus, because just like Republicans, their pundits and politicians repeat the same lines again and again, Democrats should also stay consistent and united in their message that this war never should have happened, that they will not fund or support it, and that they should rethink their relationship with Israel. But instead what usually happens is they shift the conversation toward Iran being dangerous and the nuclear issue, and then criticize Donald Trump only for how he handled things rather than opposing the war itself, as if the real issue was not being asked for approval first, when the stronger stance would be to reject the war entirely. And this becomes even more important when looking at figures like Josh Shapiro, who appears to be positioning himself for 2028 while taking a very pro-Israel stance that may not connect well with voters. Which is why, in this situation, Bernie Sanders comes across as clear and consistent in his messaging during his conversation with Caitlin Collins, and in my view he is right on point here, and there is more from Bernie that continues this line of argument.
As someone who has run for president before and been a candidate, is this something that you think will become a test for Democrats, a litmus test for Democrats in terms of the alliance with Israel?
I think it's not only Democrats. I think all over the country, people are saying, wait a minute. We can't afford housing. We can't afford health care. We can't afford childcare. We can't afford food at the grocery store. And this war now, which will cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. Why? Why? To bomb buildings in Tehran, to force 1 million people in Lebanon from their homes. So it's not just progressives and Democrats. I think you have a lot of conservatives saying Trump ran on a campaign saying, I'm going to end endless wars. We've got to invest in America, not on these endless wars. And he went back on his word. So I think the polling suggests that whether you're Republicans, Democrats, this is not a war the American people want.
Yeah, there's a poll that said a lot of Americans think that the White House isn't focused enough on domestic issues.
Yeah, no kidding. Working class people are having a hard time getting by. 60% of our people live in paycheck to paycheck, while Trump and his billionaire friends have never had it so good. And now we're spending what will amount to many hundreds of billions of dollars on a war that should not be fought. The American people are not happy about it.
And of course, they are already getting around $1 trillion for the military budget. And now Donald Trump is pushing for even more, closer to $1.5 trillion, which raises the question of why more Democrats are not speaking up and asking why an additional $200 billion is being requested for a war that roughly 70% of Americans do not even want. But the reality is the Trump administration does not seem concerned about public opinion because this is more about their donors and the way they can benefit financially, even through things like influencing the stock market. And when it comes to figures like Pete Hegseth, there is also frustration because while Trump is known for constantly bending the truth, it is possible he was being honest when he suggested that Hegseth was disappointed at the idea of the war slowing down, even though there is little evidence that it actually is, and that perception comes from the way Hegseth talks about conflict, often in a way that feels immature, like when he suggests that negotiations happen through bombs, which only adds to the concern about how seriously these situations are being handled, and it leads to the uncomfortable thought of how different history might have looked if leadership like this had been in place during something like World War II, which is not a reassuring idea at all. But bringing the focus back to Bernie Sanders, his messaging in the conversation with Caitlin Collins stands out as clear and consistent, and it is something that the speaker strongly agrees with, believing that every Democrat should be repeating the same core points that the war never should have happened, that they will not fund or support it, and that there should be a serious reconsideration of ties with Israel, although the expectation is that only a small number of Democrats, especially those aiming for a presidential run, will actually take such a firm stance despite the fact that a large portion of the country appears to agree, and this raises the question for viewers to share their own opinions on whether they support what Bernie Sanders said and whether his messaging should represent the broader Democratic Party even though he is an independent. while also encouraging engagement through likes, subscriptions, and continued discussion in future videos.